She did not need to speak. They both knew what the empty shelves meant. It was the year 1072, and winter had come early to their village on the Norwegian coast. It ended too soon when ice locked the harbor in Hor.
The food is running out. We must act now.
But spring is still 3 months away.
We have to find a way.
Bjorn was not a wealthy man. He was a farmer who owned a small piece of land and kept a few animals. Is this her or this one? That evening, Bjorn walked through the deep snow to Eric's house.
We will need to eat what our grandfathers ate. The food that kept our people alive when the land gave nothing.
I understand. It was our lifeline. When animals could not be hunted, and when every grain of barley had been consumed.
The Jarl summons us. Men of the village, hear me.
Alvad was a tall man, the scar across his myrtle's
Gray hairs, Max. We will survive this, but we must work together. We must remember the old ways.
All remaining grain will be collected and shared equally. Every family will receive a small portion each week, but grain alone will not be enough.
They would need to find other food that most people would never think to eat.
The first message to the elderly. Leif, keep up. The big pine is just ahead.
Yes, Father, it's so tall.
We'll start here. Not the rough outer bark, but the soft inner layer underneath. This inner bark saved your great-grandfather's life. When there is no bread, we make bread from trees. The inner bark from pine, birch, and spruce.
I've prepared the stone.
Shiver's son that get this through the smoke hole in the roof. Over the next days, the bark dried until it became brittle. Then Astrid and the other women ground it into a rough powder using stone. This bark flour was mixed with the small amount of grain they had left.
This bread is hard and bitter,
Not like our bow bread.
but it gives us strength.
To continue.
It tastes like wood.
It is wood.
And it will keep you alive. Do not waste it. Leif learned to eat without complaining. All the children in the village learned this lesson quickly.
But bark bread alone was not enough. The village needed more food sources. Bjorn remembered Eric's other instructions. Growing in a crusty substance, it looked like dried leather stuck to the rocks. This was rock tripe, a type of lichen that grew in the coldest places. Other men from the village did the same, spreading out across the hills to gather. They also type of lichen that grew in patches on the ground.
This batch is still bitter. We'll need to change the water again.
All right, I'll get fresh water ready.
Like substance. It had almost no taste, but it could be mixed with bark flour or eaten on its own. It was not pleasant. Near the coast, where the ice had formed thick and solid, the seaweed was frozen and covered in ice crystals, but it could be thawed and eaten.
Astrid knew how to prepare the seaweed. My mother taught me, the kelp must be boiled until soft. Dulse, a red seaweed, can be dried and eaten like tough leather.
The seaweed provided salt and other things their bodies needed. Without it, people became weak and sick.
We learned long ago that seaweed is vital for health, especially in winter, when no fresh food can be found. As the food situation grew worse, I made a difficult decision. We had to use the cattle and horses.
These animals were very valuable. They provided milk in the warmer months and could be used for work. Killing them for meat would solve the immediate hunger.
But it would create bigger problems later. Without animals, it would a practice that made some of the younger villagers uncomfortable.
You don't kill them. You take blood, carefully. Show me. Steady the neck, insert the needle, and draw back slowly. The animal will make more blood.
We can do this every few weeks. The cow lives, and we get food. The blood was mixed with water and heated over the fire.
The women added whatever they could find, dried herbs that had been stored from summer, pieces of bark flour, even small amounts of the lichen paste.
This created a dark soup that was rich in strength-giving nutrients.
It smells unusual, Astrid.
It's blood soup.
Blood soup? I cannot eat this.
You will eat, or you will grow weak and die. Choose now, like a monk about to praise. The body learns to accept what it must when survival is at stake.
When the autumn fish had been preserved, only the best parts of the fish were kept for normal eating. The heads, tails, fins, and skins were usually traded away or used for other purposes. Now, these became precious food. Fish heads were boiled for hours to extract every bit of nutrition. The bones were crushed with stones, and even the bone powder was consumed or added to soups. This gelatin had no taste, but it could be mixed with other foods. It made the thin soup seem thicker and more filling.
Every part of every fish that had been caught months ago was now carefully used. Look, these fish have been hanging for months.
They're rock hard, far too dry to eat.
A total waste.
These were soaked in water for days until they softened, then torn into small pieces and added to whatever meal was being prepared.
Fish that had been considered too old or too tough were now treated according to old Viking laws and customs during this crisis.
My people, these are the last of our stores. Every grain must be measured. This is all we have.
Every person received a portion, received smaller portions than free people. This was the way of Viking society.
Yet even the thralls will receive enough to survive.
A dead slave was worthless, and when spring came, workers would be needed to plant crops and rebuild what winter had destroyed.
The elderly people in the village made their own quiet decisions. Old Eric and others like him began taking smaller portions of food.
Many years ahead of them. Some elderly people became weak and sick as winter continued.
They accepted this as the natural order. The young must survive.
To continue the community.
It was a harsh reality, but Vikings understood that survival sometimes required difficult choices.
They had lived long lives and decided to make sure the rationing and the sharing of strange foods.
The children stopped playing their usual games. Everyone focused on staying warm and staying alive until spring arrived.
We made it. We're back. Thought we'd never see this place again.
We found them in the deep forest,
The ptarmigan,
against the snow.
almost invisible.
These birds changed their feathers with the seasons, turning white in winter and brown in summer.
Dropping to spot the birds themselves. Using snares made from braided horsehair, the hunters caught several ptarmigan. It was not many, but it was fresh meat, the first in many weeks. Alvard ordered the birds to be shared among the families with the youngest children. The small portions of meat were precious beyond measure.
Success! Others join the hunt. We will try for the tribe.
They also set snares for Arctic hares, which also turned white in winter. These animals were hard to find and harder to catch.
But even one hare could provide a meal for a family. The hunters learned something that showed where animals had sparked.
My ancestors' legacy, the stories I heard but never grasped. Now holding this, it all becomes clear.
Far to the west, in Iceland, Vikings had developed a way to preserve shark meat.
Into the head.
Gravel pits. Heavy stones were placed on top. The shark meat was left there for months, pressed down and fermenting in its own fluids. This process made the shark meat safe to eat. Sharks had poison in their flesh when fresh, but the fermentation broke down the dangerous parts. The resulting food, but it could keep people alive through the winter. When it started,
Vikings always found ways to survive. They learned to eat what others could not or would not eat.
They developed methods to preserve food and extract nutrition from sources that seemed possible.
As the weeks turned into months, the village changed. People became thinner. Faces grew hollow and pale. The village mourned them but could not stop to grieve for long. Children learned lessons that would stay with them forever.
they learned that life in the far north was hard and unforgiving.
The cold is brutal.
We need to cooperate.
And use our knowledge.
They learned to waste nothing and to be grateful for everything, even bark bread and lichen paste.
The women kept the fires burning and the longhouses warm. They mended clothes over and over because there was no wool to make new ones.
They sang old songs to keep spirits up.
These stories are not just branches and survived. Our searches were not just entertainment. This knowledge kept our people alive.
How, Elder?
It is how we survive the harshest of lands.
Finally, after 3 months of darkness and cold and hunger, the first signs of spring appeared. The days grew slightly longer.
Seal in the water! To the boat! Push harder! Break the ice! We're back! Pull haul!
The seal meat was divided among all the families. It was the first substantial meat the village had eaten in months.
Spring had arrived. Not everyone had made it to sickness, but most of the 200 people were still alive. Leaf stood next to his father, taller now but much thinner.
Will we have to eat bark bread again next winter?
I do not know, but now you know how.
You know what our people ate to survive? You know that we can endure almost anything if we remember the old ways and work together.
The fields were prepared for planting. The surviving animals were carefully tended.
Slowly, the village rebuilt hard times. This was the Viking world.
The foods that had saved them, the bark bread, the lichen paste, the blood soup, and the seaweed, were not forgotten, even when other food was available. Blood sausage remained a common food in Scandinavia for centuries to come. Dried fish and bark bread were staples, even in the 1800s. Survival for Vikings was not glorious. It was bark from trees, lichen from rocks, seaweed from the frozen shore, and blood from that tasted like wood. But these humble liverets, they transformed what seemed like impossible hardship into survivable reality.
I remember that winter with your great-grandfather Eric.
Tell us, Grandpa.
Look here.
The right bark has deep ridges.
First, prepare the lichen by grinding it smooth on a stone. Find seaweed, break the ice. Vikings must be resourceful.
We let bark bread and courage of hasty and survive who wish to surrender.
That knowledge passed from generation to generation. What was the secret to their success? It was the secret to their success. More important than any sword or ship, they knew their environment completely. They wasted nothing. They adapted to whatever challenges nature presented.
And most importantly, they remembered. They remembered how their ancestors survived, and they made sure their children would remember too.